Microsoft Community Insights podcast, where we share insights from community experts to stay up to date in Microsoft. I am Nicholas and I'll be your host today. In this podcast, we will dive into .NET open source library lessons learned. Before we get started, I want to remind you to follow us on social media so you never miss an episode and help us reach more amazing people like yourself. Today, we have a special guest called Jokey. Can you please introduce yourself, please?
Yes, hi there everyone. My name is Jochen Kirstätter, or as you said, short is Jokey, which keeps it easy for each and everyone. I'm a software developer since now more than 2 decades. Enjoying development on Windows. This is where I started, kind of on classic desktop development. I jumped into the first betas or early betas of .NET back in the 2000s. And kept it in regular touch with it, went through the different stages of the framework, and enjoying latest .NET 8, .NET 9 development and bits and pieces. So it's quite good. And apart from that, doing a couple of things on cloud, like on Microsoft Azure or on Google Cloud Platform, and having some fun with AI recently.
Good. But let's dive into what you do on the day-to-day as a software development. Can you just briefly describe what your role is and what involved?
Okay, yeah, sure. Well, actually, I'm running my own business, so I'm offering software development services for customers, mainly in Europe. Different projects, different areas, keeps it nice and interesting over time, because there are always new challenges coming up, which is pretty great. For example, recently I'm in the middle of development regarding the electronic sick leave system in Germany. So it's pretty interesting how to, develop this and make a client integration with .NET, which is pretty cool. On the other side, I have to admit, I do legacy applications because the majority of my time I spend actually with Microsoft Visual Fox Pro, which is some really old school stuff, but still it's a cash cow for many clients. And the numbers of developers that are still very familiar with these kind of systems, similar to COBOL, is getting lower. So there's a high demand. I mean, I'm pretty happy. My position is looking very good. However, keeping on the pulse of time, as I mentioned, I'm also doing .NET. And as I said, electronic sick leave system, bits and pieces, electronic invoicing system that is in Germany, that is in Europe. So these are all these kind of things that I'm integrating into these kind of applications using .NET. So still working with possibilities that you can enhance existing legacy systems with latest functionality provided by .NET.
Okay,
So that's
so
quite some good fun.
tell us more about that electronic system, because I'm curious. Are you using a .NET with AI in that electronic system?
Yes.
The backend, or are you using any like AI with it involving?
Not really. So actually what I'm doing is that I'm writing, on the one side, I'm writing components that can be then used and integrated with the legacy applications. So it's actually direct integration, like via COM interface, which is one possibility. However, there is also the possibility that you can have this COM-free integration of runtime into the application. So there's a kind of a bridge system, and that's what I'm using. And so this gives us the ability that, okay, with the existing legacy systems, we can then, use the performance, security, and power of what .NET is offering and bring it into those legacy applications. For example, if it's like you need to have communication with a third-party system, there is an existing library for .NET. It's easier to use this .NET library, write some kind of an interface / wrapper for the legacy application instead of having to write a complete client outside of .NET.
It's like easy way to upgrade your legacy system to a new version of .NET.
Well, it's extending it. The core application stays in Foxborough, but bits and pieces, components, functionalities, let's say modules of the applications can be run then with .NET components.
Okay, so what are some of the challenges that you faced throughout your journey using .NET as a software developer?
Oh, right. There had been quite a few over the time. So one of the things is actually that in between I was too much focused on sticking with a legacy application. So
Yeah,
I missed about half a year, 1 year of active development. So I was like, oh my word, it's like you're losing a quarter of your life, if you're not on the spot, like with a 1 year of a break. It's
yeah,
like, it was like, I think it was back from that framework 4.0 to 4.5 or something like that. And there was so much stuff happening during this time. And I was like, oh my word, there's so much new stuff in .NET
yeah,
and bits and pieces. And then I was actually quite happy that .NET Core came out, because then it was really like, okay, everything new from scratch, at least code-wise. And I also liked the fact that that .NET Core from the beginning was cross-platform,
yeah.
because although that I'm doing my professional activities on the Windows platform, I'm a die-hard Linux user since very early days. So therefore, I was really happy as well that, with .NET Core, I could then get my hands directly on the latest .NET stuff, and experimenting with it on Linux and not just on Windows. So that was actually how it helped me to bridge that gap of knowledge that I lost in between. And other than that, yeah, I mean, having this .NET Core, .NET
Yeah.
development from scratch, and the comparison about the differences in the APIs between .NET Framework and what is now in .NET 8 available and bits and pieces. So how you can bridge these two with using .NET Standard. That was quite challenging, but on the other side, I love it, because it's really a fantastic way to migrate applications as well. So if you have something still running in .NET Framework, you push it onto .NET Standard, and you have your open path to migrate bits and pieces here and there then to .NET 8, and it's just great to work with that.
So one of the questions I've got is that what's the difference between .NET Framework and .NET Core? Because they're different type of like .NET, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, .NET
Is
Framework
it just
came out
library
back.
that's different?
No, it's a complete development stack. I mean, the thing
Okay.
is that .NET Framework came out back in 2001,
Yeah.
2002, and it is built on top of the Windows 32 APIs. So you have still quite some activities that are Windows specific, and the the breakage came then with .NET Core, because .NET Core directly had the shift in the paradigm about, hey, there is not only Windows. There's Linux, there's Mac OS, there are other
Yeah.
platforms like ARM64, as it
Yeah.
turned out. Even though that they share the same name, it's two different products that are having similarities. And .NET Core, or nowadays, since .NET 6, it's just .NET, is really a product that has been built up from scratch, being cross-platform, giving you this unified experience that you can really have these cross-platform development. Of course, there are still, you know, here and there some restrictions, because certain implementations are not available on one or the other platform. However, it's completely free of any kind of Windows activities, and I think this is the major step forward that Microsoft did when they came out around 2015, 2016 with the development of .NET Core. And I really love it about this way, because even if you see on Azure, the majority of systems is running on Linux and not on Windows
Yeah.
anymore. And having then the ability that you can say, okay, you can offer your services for .NET developers running on a stable Linux system under the hood, that's a win-win for each and everyone.
So you can put a .NET in a Linux environment?
Yeah, sure. If you set up your project, you
Yeah.
.NET new, and you write your project and your implementations and bits and pieces, and you have your assembly. because whatever you compile with your .NET build, at the end, it's a DLL that comes out, and then you need the host environment, the host to execute and launch your assembly. And the interesting thing is you can take the assembly, the DLL, as it is from a Windows system, and you can run it on a Linux system, and vice versa, and even on a Mac system.
Okay, yeah. It's multi-system now, so it's everywhere it can run the net. So that's quite cool. So what are some of the most interesting thing or project that you've been on that's you use .NET or something that?
Well, I mean, for the customers on the one
Yeah,
side,
is it just
as,
like updating libraries or
no,
migration
no,
of
no, no,
.NET?
no. No. I mean, one part is that we have their existing legacy systems about
Yeah.
extending them, even migrating them to .NET. On the other side is a situation that last year, around February, March, I jumped into a sprint organized by Google in regards to their Gemini AI system. And there I then said, okay, let's have a look what is available for Google Gemini. And to my surprise is the situation that there is no SDK by Google that allows you to use Google Gemini in .NET. And so then last year in March, I sat down because it was a, let's say, scheduled sprint for over 4 weeks. And yeah, I really went into the documentation, into the API reference, into the samples about how the existing SDKs, like in Python, worked and how they were designed. And I created the Gemini SDK for .NET from scratch.
Wow. How long does it take you? That's quite accomplishment.
Well, actually, I have to say that within those 4 weeks, so during the month of March, I got it up and running
Yeah.
with, let's say, 80% of functionality compared to the Python SDK. And then in, let's say, April, May, I added the remaining bits and pieces. And the interesting part is also that Google Gemini actually comes with two interfaces. On the one side, you have the, let's say, the one running on Google AI Studio.
Yeah.
So you get one API for Gemini, which is more like for, hobbyists and prototyping, just for quick and easy experimenting. But on the other side, you have Google Cloud Platform. And there you have the second interface, which is then actually Vertex AI. And the interesting part back in the time, let's say last year, March, it was that Google offered two SDKs for each programming language. So there was, for Python, you got one SDK for Google AI and one for
Yeah.
Vertex AI. For Java, the same. There were two SDKs for each program language that Google supported, and which was really strange and weird. And so one of the things that I did is that I looked into the documentation of both interfaces, and the .NET SDK that I created directly had this unified experience, so that using just one SDK for .NET, you
Yeah.
could actually then program against both interfaces, whether was the hobby side with on the Google AI Studio interface or the Vertex AI running on Google Cloud Platform. And the cool part is actually that around about November last year, so let's say like half a year ago, this is when Google themselves came out with their unified SDK for Python, which offered exactly the same kind of feature that you take one SDK and you can decide during initialization which interface that you want to use and operate against. So that was a pretty cool experience, and to see that unified SDK. All right,
Yeah.
you get it in .NET before even Google handed it out in their official SDKs.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure there's one SDK for like Azure AI. So I'm not sure that there's some few like Azure OpenAI, AI Foundry
Well,
stuff. You want to do .NET or something for building application. So it could be like an integration alongside Google if you want. So
yes, there's additional functionalities is that you have for Microsoft, you have semantic kernel, and you also have the Microsoft Extensions AI. And the interesting part is that based on the interface definition in the Microsoft Extensions AI, I created a second package specifically for Microsoft integration. So meaning that my package that I created for Google Gemini has a second NuGet package that offers those implementations. So meaning that just by using one of my packages, you get the, iChat client as well as the embedding generator for
Okay.
Gemini. So it's really 3 lines of code, and you can use Google Gemini in your application using Microsoft Extensions AI package.
Okay, so you can probably, it's a way to integrate bit of Google AI and so on Microsoft AI into your .NET application, so have both functionality.
Yes, yes. I mean, well, it is that you use the Gemini, the Google AI
Yeah,
system in
yeah,
your .NET application. So it is separate from OpenAI, from Azure OpenAI. So
yeah,
it's just Google Gemini. This is what you can use, all the available models, whether it's 1.5, 2.0,
yeah,
2.5, the latest models, even Gemma, all of the models that are provided by Google are
yeah,
supported by the SDK, and you can, again, with adding the NuGet package, 3 lines of code, and then you can use Google Gemini in your .NET applications. Straightforward.
yeah. That's quite cool. Let's dive into some of the open source things contribution that you're doing, because you mentioned earlier that you created your own SDK for .NET. Have you created any like open source libraries?
Well, it is open source, this one. So this
Yeah.
Gemini SDK is an open source library. So it's hosted on GitHub.
So it's open source and anyone can use it, and that's quite cool.
Yeah. You get it as a NuGet package. So
Yeah,
simply by go forward, say .NET add package,
yeah,
mscc.generative AI, you add it to your project. And the interesting part is also that it works for .NET Framework,
yeah,
as well as for .NET Core or .NET. So it's supporting both sides. So you can, use the full range of .NET applications in order then to integrate Google Gemini with it.
okay, that's quite cool. That's amazing. This is a good question for myself. So what are some of how can you integrate one against, can't remember what's the question. Yeah, how do you keep track of like .NET libraries up to date? Like if you should check for like vulnerability in CSV, what's the best way and more efficient way?
Well, in my case, that with the library that I created is that I keep it as small as possible. So I
Yeah,
think I have maybe one third party, and I
uh,
think two. Yeah, because as I said, I mean, I have the Microsoft extension logging
yeah,
to provide iLogger interface, but I really keep it on purpose on a small number of dependencies. And I think at the moment there are 2, maximum 3 libraries that I wouldn't that implement the SDK. And if there is the need for more, I have a separate package for it. So for example, if you want to use the integration of Google Gemini with ASP.NET, there's
yeah,
actually a web package that is built on top of my core package. If you want to integrate it, as I mentioned, with Microsoft Extensions AI, there's a Microsoft package on top of my core package, so that the actual number of dependencies is as small as possible.
yeah,
So this helps me to keep a good overview, and I'm also like more or less every second, every other day, I check if there are NuGet updates, and then I keep it up to date. Like just earlier today, I saw that there was a dependency package that was updated, did the upgrade, and pushed it out. So earlier today, just a few hours ago, I pushed out a new release based on the fact that everything is just running on, CI/CDs. For me, it's about taking the version, pushing it, and then at the end, it appears automatically on NuGet in the gallery, and people can upgrade their clients.
yeah. Because I remember at my current workplace, I think we kind of use Dependabot for GitHub to try to update it, but There's a
No.
few like we still have to approve the PR and check whether the CSV is correct against the latest one and find a fix towards it.
Yep, yep.
So I guess based on what your advice is, keep the APIs that you use in your library at a smaller minimum so you can just only concentrate on few exposure that you need to update.
Yeah, at the moment I'm monitoring myself. As I said, every second day I check if there's package updates because I mean I
Yeah,
don't have much of dependencies. However, I also looked already into the depender bot
yeah,
and I have it like ready at hand. It's just that I need to push the changes into the repository and enable it on GitHub so that I get the automatic pull requests from DependerBot if there's anything. And so far, I have to say that, for example, with the Microsoft extensions AI, because they are still in preview and there's a lot of, let's say, movement happening. It's pretty cool actually that Stephen Taub from Microsoft, he is actually creating the pull requests for my SDK if there are any changes in the Microsoft extension AI, and he does it also for a couple of other repositories, which is pretty cool because it's like, wow, you're getting pull requests from a Microsoftie for your SDK.
yeah. It's quite a lot of contributors. It means that lots of people using your SDK, so it's great. It's
I,
amazing thing to do.
I I'm just checking. Let me have a look. Well, we are close to 50,000 downloads on NuGet and a total of about 75, 80,000 over all 4 packages. So
Yeah,
yeah, maybe a few people are using the package. Not so many,
yeah,
but I mean, I'm super happy about it. I'm close to 50,000 downloads. I mean, I didn't expect that when I
yeah,
started it last year in March. So it was like, come on, I want to use Google Gemini for my own .NET applications. And I was
yeah,
like, okay, let's put it as a repo or make it public, see what happens. And
yeah.
yeah, it's fun.
So yeah, I'm curious to know whether Microsoft got like a GitHub Copilot with .NET because I know that they have one for Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. So I'm not sure if they have one for .NET or a different interface like AI built to help with
Yes, you
code.
do. Yes, you do. On the one side, I have to say, for example, shameless spot now. I'm using JetBrains Rider because
Okay.
I'm running on Linux. So I'm actually
Yeah.
doing the development of this SDK is happening on Linux. So I'm using JetBrains. Very cool JetBrains Rider. So I really love it. On the other side, on Windows, I'm using Visual Studio, and I'm also using Visual Studio Code on both platforms. So, and yeah, as you might have noticed, I really love and like Google Gemini. So since the very beginning is actually that I'm using their code assistant in order then to review and to improve my code. So just it was only recently that I started experimenting a bit more with Copilot.
Yeah.
However, since almost 2 years now, I'm using Google Gemini as a code assist. And so far, I've been really happy. It's also for the SDK, the majority of the documentation, whether it is source code documentation, like the XML docs, or even if it's then actual documentation, or if it's unit tests that I
Yeah.
needed for my SDK, the majority of them has been generated using Gemini.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. So yeah, that's quite good. Plus you have 50,000 downloads on your SDK, so it's quite niche.
Almost.
Almost. Yeah. So apart from Russell, so apart from your passion for .NET and software development, so we like to always get to know a guest. So what do you like to do in your spare time? Do you like to just contribute to open source, help the community, open source community?
Yes. So let's take this in 2 tracks.
Yeah,
On the one side is a situation that um, before I immigrated to Mauritius,
yeah,
I grew up in Germany. So during that time, I was already part in the developer ecosystem. For over 2 years, I was running a regional user group focused
Okay.
on Foxborough,
Yeah.
and till about end of 2006. Then beginning of 2007, I immigrated to Mauritius. Enjoying it here on the tropical island. It's pretty cool. But the situation was that the concept of user groups was not really present. So people were like doing their 9 to 5 jobs.
Yeah.
And I was then asking a few colleagues at the time, it's like, don't you do, voluntary or in your free time user group meetings, maybe in the evening or maybe on a Saturday? And they were like, what are you talking about? What is this user group? We haven't
Yeah.
heard about that. And so then after sorting out a couple of things with the business and then with private life, it was that in 2013, my, let's say, yeah, um, appetite for user groups grew so much that I
Yeah.
then just said, okay, I start my own. And
Kudos to you.
purely selfish. And I
Yeah.
have to say that then I have to say that it's like, I had this concept, this idea about, doing like a weekly code and coffee meeting just
Yeah.
at a public coffee, and seeing maybe somebody is showing up. And I have to say that I think the first 6 times I was completely on my own. I spent there like 2 hours at the cafe, having my tablet, checking my emails, doing, bits and pieces and hoping that somebody would show up. And then finally, after like 7 weeks, 2 people showed up and they were actually Linux guys. And as I love Linux, we actually talked about a lot of Linux during this
Yeah.
first real get together back in 2013. And yeah, now with 12 years past, it's the largest user group here on the island in the country. We have like close to 2,500 subscribers or members. Since 2015, we are organizing an annual developers conference. Our next one is scheduled for July. Last year, we had over 1,500, 1,600 attendees over those 3 days. And so, yeah, it's been really a blessing,
Yeah.
that I started the user group back then. And I'm still having fun because I have this passion, this drive about sharing experience with others.
Yeah.
Also, if they're coming up with questions, I like to assist, I like to help, maybe, asking the right questions when they are stuck to stimulate them about coming up with solutions,
Yeah.
maybe looking at problems at a different angle. This is what I like, which also means that during the past years, I participated in a couple of mentorship programs. I helped a couple of people to excel in their areas. So this is one side in my spare time. On the other side is that private life is that, well, I try from time to time to go scuba diving. However, that's not happening often enough since COVID or since after COVID. Also, that after I had been treated and cured from cancer, is that
I
we are
don't know
looking
that.
more into. We are looking a little bit more into gardening, a little bit more healthy
Yeah.
activities. So, enjoying quality of life.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah. So in terms of the user group one, kudos to you because some at the start of the journey or anything, it's quite tough, but if you keep going towards it, it get eventually better. So it's just it's
Mhm.
normal. It's amazing thing that you do, trying to balance everything out, your work, your passion for the community as well, your hobbies with like doing things that help your lifestyle, whether it's your personal
Yes.
goal. Yeah. So it's quite kudos to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Time management is quite important. The thing is also that as I'm running my own business,
Yeah.
have a high degree of flexibility. With my customers being in Europe, I also have the advantage that with the time difference of at the moment 2 hours that I'm ahead of them, have
Yeah.
flexibility in the morning. On the other side, I'm not doing a classic 9 to 5 job because I have an obligation to say that, there are tasks that need to be done.
Yeah.
Focusing in them. And, sometimes it's happening like being under the shower in the evening. It's like, oh, yes, this is how I can try to solve the problem for the customer. And then I can happen like at 10 o'clock in the evening, I
Yeah.
pop open the laptop and I sit down for another 1 hour, 2 hours, maybe 3 hours till after midnight and to come up with a solution. And so, yeah, and I can, put this on my spreadsheet, like productive time, and at the end of the month I can charge a customer for that.
Yeah, sometimes that happens to anyone really. Sometimes you can just have a like light bulb moment when you're not working and when you're sleeping, and then you want to just do something, fix an issue because it's in your head or write it down. So that it's not, you're not alone. So it happens to myself as well. So whether it's just write it down in the notes, so tomorrow you can just go ahead test it to see if it's fixed. So that's
Yeah.
so. As this podcast coming to an end, Russian. So, any other advice that you recommend people when going into software development or .NET?
hmm Well, advice number one: never stop learning.
Yeah,
I see this. You have the students; they are learning for their studies to get their graduation done, for their exams. When you then look at professionals, especially the juniors, it's a situation that they literally stop learning. And in the first place, it's like when we have new members coming to the community, is one of my pet questions is like, how many books did you read during the last 12 months? And it's amazing to see first the reaction on people's face, and then getting the answer from them. It's like, well, I read maybe 1, 2 books, which is
yeah,
already a lot. And it's like, but during studies, how many books did you read? And they were like, yeah, I was like going through 5, 6, maybe 7 books during a year. Now I have my job, and they stop learning. And I'm like, no, you need to continuously learn. And I mean, we see it. The previews of .NET 10 are just coming out, and there's lots of changes, lot of new stuff, new concept, new ideas that the teams at Microsoft are putting into it, and it's a continuous journey. So you can't just say, okay, I graduated, I got my job, and forget about learning. So no, if you want to stay ahead of the game, if you want to play in the major leagues, if you want to be good in your job, continue learning. That's a daily experience. And whether you do it for programming or
yeah,
maybe it's something else like a hobby, I love doing language learning. It's that apart from English, German, I know a little bit of French, I know a little bit of Mauritian Creole, but I also, because of another job in the past, I actually started to learn Dutch, which is also pretty much fun. But the quintessence is learning is a daily experience. You wake up in the morning, you learn something. If by the end of the day you haven't learned something new, pop up a book, you know, and
yeah.
learn something, because this
It-
keeps you stimulated. And the funny thing is, out of own experience, even that I sometimes, learn something that has absolutely nothing to do with my current assignments in about 3, 4, 5 months later, it's like, Jokey, are you aware of this and that? And I'm like, yeah, I read about that already, like, some months back, and it's an interesting concept, and it can be done in such and such a way. And people are like, wow, that's great. Let's, dig deeper into that. And so
yeah,
this
because
really helped me to stay.
yeah, one thing I want to add is that everyone learn differently. So you don't, if you're not a reader like myself, you can still like watch videos or learn by audio as well. So everyone learn it different. But I think the important thing is to be consistent at your learning
Yeah,
and don't rush it. Learn at your own pace because the fast movements in Microsoft on AI is overwhelming. So you just have to take time and learn bit by bit. You don't want to get overwhelmed with too much learning at once. So learn at your own pace and just be consistent, I would say.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's what,
definitely. That's great advice. I mean, first of all, choose your preferred medium.
Yeah.
Some people like to read, others like to watch videos, others like to listen to podcasts to learn things. It's up to you. Choose what works for you. And yeah, consistency is key. Every day a bit, accumulate it over time. Time is the game changer. The classic race between the hare and the tortoise. Keep it going. Persistency always wins over talent.
Yeah.
And last but not least, look into the fundamentals. So whatever you exploring as a technology, look into the fundamentals, build up a strong fundament, and then you can spread out into other areas. But the important part is really about fundamentals. And when you get them done with your pace, then the other things, like more high-level activities, they fall into place because you have a better understanding of the fundamentals.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, I always start to the basic of it before learning. So, like whether it's learning agents and stuff, how to learn like what it is and stuff, or fundamental of it. Okay, so thanks for joining this episode, Loki. It's a pleasure, and I learned some bit of .NET and your library, so it's amazing thing to see. Everyone learned something. I learned something as well. Thank you.
Wonderful.
So I hope you have a
Thank
good
you so
evening.
much, Nicola.
Bye.
Have a great
All
time
right.
and
Bye.
see you around. Take care.
Bye.